Hi everyone, this is Gary Varner and welcome to Renegade Reason. Today, let me start like this. Basically, there's been this kind of weird thing showing up on the internet lately where people have been claiming that Obama is going to submit us to a one-world government. Submit us to the UN, basically. This whole accusation was based on his final speech to the United Nations back in September. So I thought I would do another reaction compilation to an Obama speech. Now, I'm going to try something different. Instead of playing the whole speech through for you guys, I'm actually going to watch the speech, react to it, then cut it to just show you the highlights. Now, so let me know if you guys prefer that, or if you would prefer to watch the whole thing and have me react to the whole thing. So just give me an idea of what you guys would like me to do, and we're just, and you know, if you want me to show the whole video, I'll show the whole video at a later time. So, alright, with that being said, let us begin.
The progress that we've made these last 8 years. From the depths of the greatest financial crisis of our time, we coordinated our response to avoid further catastrophe and return the global economy to growth. We've taken away terrorist safe havens, strengthened the non-proliferation regime,
and then made a new one.
Resolved the Iranian nuclear issue through diplomacy.
By giving them nuclear weapons.
We opened relations with Cuba, helped Colombia, and end Latin America's longest war.
You just lifted the ban. How has that helped anything?
Establishing a framework to protect our planet from the ravages of climate change.
Not a thing.
This is important work. It has made a real difference in the lives of our people. And it could not have happened had we not worked together.
Well, it would have been great if you'd done the jobs thing first. That would have been nice. That might have been a better priority, but anyway.
We are seeing the same forces.
Hey, wow, it's John Kerry looking more decrepit than usual.
That have made us interdependent, also expose deep fault lines in the existing international order. Basic security, basic order has broken down.
Because of ISIS, the army you and Clinton
We see too many
created.
governments muzzling journalists and quashing dissent and censoring the flow of information.
Oh yeah, because you didn't persecute whistleblowers or anything.
Upon the minds of our youth. I want to suggest to you today that we must go forward and not backward.
What does that even mean?
The internet can deliver the entirety of human knowledge to a young girl in a remote village on a single handheld device.
And why did you try to give it to China?
Moreover, the collapse of colonialism and communism has allowed more people than ever before to live with the freedom to choose their leaders. Despite
and half the UN looks at him and goes, "Boo! Choice, boo!"
Sexual orientation, and those who deny others dignity.
And the Muslims like, "Boo! Gay people, boo!"
Alternative visions of the world have pressed forward, both in the wealthiest countries and in the poorest. Religious fundamentalism, the politics of ethnicity or tribe or sect, aggressive nationalism, a crude populism, sometimes from the far left, but more often from the far right, which seeks to restore what they believe was a better, simpler age free of outside contamination. We cannot dismiss
Is that a Trump shot? That must be a Trump shot. It must be.
They are powerful.
Of course, this is before Trump won the election, so...
Today, a nation ringed by walls would only imprison itself.
Oh, that was a shot at Trump. Wow, that took me a second. It's like, don't build a wall. It'll let me. I agree with it, but these shots are just so petty. I mean, no, I don't think we should build a wall, obviously, but I mean, good night. He's just always so backhanded about everything. It's like, you're talking to the UN. Nobody in Trump's crowd is even talking to you. This is just pandering to the media networks that are sitting in the cameras in the back. This is a show.
Let me offer in broad strokes those areas where I believe we must do better together.
Get a new president, number one.
Unions have been undermined, and many manufacturing jobs have disappeared.
Because they drive up prices and make even more jobs disappear, but that's another matter. We're not going to think about that anymore. Okay, moving on.
Technology now allows any person with a smartphone to see how the most privileged among us live, and the contrast between their own lives and others.
Wait a minute. If they have a
Expectations
smartphone,
rise then, faster
they
than
are
governments
the
in world.
privileged.
If we start resorting to trade wars, market-distorting subsidies,
Okay, this is
beggar
another
by
shot
neighbor
at Trump.
policies, and
Because this is what was
over-reliance
going on
natural
before the election,
resources
the
instead of
tariffs and things like
innovation,
that. He was going to start a trade
these
war.
approaches will
He was
make
going to
us
pay
poor
for the wall
collectively,
using
and
a
they are
trade
more
war
likely
of
to
some
lead
kind, so
conflict.
that is a shot.
We push for transparency and cooperation in rooting out corruption and tracking illicit dollars. Because
Solyndra.
markets create more jobs
Was
when they're
Solyndra
fueled by
illicit
hard
dollars?
work
Does that count as
and not
illicit dollars or whatever?
extorted
Solyndra,
bribe.
you know, that company that failed. Or what about Turtle
That's why we work to
Highways?
reach trade agreements
When the
that
stimulus
raise labor
package
standards
happened,
and
were those
raise
was that
environmental
illicit?
standards.
What about
We've
zip
done with
codes
the
that didn't
Trans-Pacific
exist? All that
Partnerships
money
and
that went to
the
zip codes
benefits
that were not even on the
of
map. Would that count as illicit money? I'm confused. What illicit money have you
Just as
stopped
we
again? Just
benefit by combating
curious.
it, for the small fraction of what we spent at war in Iraq, we could support institutions so that fragile states don't collapse in the first place, and invest in emerging economies that become markets for our goods.
And where's that money going to come from when you have so much debt?
It's not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do.
How?
And that's why we need to follow through on our efforts to combat climate change.
What's the
We don't act
connection
boldly,
between
a
that?
bill that could come due
Oh, well, we've got to stabilize all the
be mass
countries, and
migration
that's why we
and
have to work
cities
on climate
submerged
change. Are you
and
kidding
nations
me?
displaced
Those
and
two
food
thoughts
supplies
have
decimated
nothing in
and
common.
conflicts born
How
of
did you even get there? For another thing, these green energy policies skyrocket
poorer
prices
countries
everywhere.
leapfrog destructive
And while
forms
50
of
cents
energy.
in America would be an annoyance to
For the
us, it's
wealthiest
crippling
countries,
in Mexico.
We've learned that liberal democracy will not just wash across the globe in a single wave. It turns out building accountable
Wow.
institutions
Those
is hard
people
work.
look thoroughly Russian.
The work of
I mean, if
generations.
you wanted to say, hey, who would the
The gains
Russian,
are
or
often fragile.
ask what would the Russian diplomats look like?
Sometimes we take
What would
one
they have
step
looked like?
forward
And
and
they
two
would have
steps
looked
back.
like those guys. I don't know if this is racist or not, but they screamed former
Politics.
KGB. I'm just saying.
Young people need a global education in order to thrive.
How does a
Independent
global
media
education? What the hell
needs
is
to
that?
check the abuses of power.
How a global education? Explain to me what that is. Don't just gloss
Without
by
this
that. That's
revolution,
crazy.
Because of our Bill of Rights, because of our ideals, ordinary people were able to organize and march and protest, and ultimately those ideals won out. Opened doors for women and minorities and workers in ways that made our economy more productive and turned our diversity into a strength. That gave innovators the chance to transform every area of human endeavor. That made it possible for someone like me to be elected President of the United States.
See, there's just enough truth in his
So,
statement
yes,
to be dangerous.
My views
You know,
are
he
shaped
says
by
stuff
the
like that, and you're like,
specific
yeah,
experiences
I
of
agree with
America,
that. That's
but
great.
I
That's
do
awesome.
not think
And then he turns around and
this story is
says stupid
unique
shit
to
like
America.
global education and weird
Look at the
global ideas.
transformation
I
taking
honestly
place
don't know what he's referring to. That
Countries
sounds
as different
spooky
as
though.
Japan and Chile. After all, the people of Ukraine did not take to the streets because of some plot imposed from abroad. They took to the streets because their leadership was for sale, and they had no recourse. They demanded change because they saw life
Ukraine
get
guy's
better
sitting
for
there
people
agreeing
in the
with that.
Baltics and in Poland. Societies that were
He
more
feels pretty
liberal and
passionately about that,
democratic
which
and
is
open
fine.
than
I
their
don't
own.
blame
In
him.
America, there is too much money in politics, too much entrenched partisanship, too little participation by citizens, in part because of a patchwork of laws that makes it harder to vote.
Oh, hush.
In Europe, a well-intentioned
Yeah,
Brussels
the
welcome
fact that you have to
became
pull
too
out your
isolated
driver's
from
license, which you're
the
supposed to
normal-
have with you
normal
anyway,
push
makes it
and pull of
way
national
more
politics.
difficult to vote. It's not that it's because people believe that, their vote
Too
really
often
doesn't
in
count
capitals,
anymore because it's a rigged system. No.
decision-makers
No, that's
have
not why
forgotten
people don't
that
participate.
democracy
It's
used
the
to be governed
driver's
by
license thing. It's the
citizen
only
engagement
possible
from the bottom up. I
explanation.
recognize a traditional society may value unity and cohesion more than a diverse country like my own, which was founded upon what at the time was a radical idea, the idea of the liberty of individual human beings, endowed with certain God-given rights. But that does not mean that ordinary people in Asia or Africa or the Middle East somehow prefer arbitrary rule that denies them a voice in the decisions that can shape their lives. I believe that spirit is universal. And if any of you doubt the universality of that desire, listen to the voices of young people everywhere who call out for freedom and dignity. We must reject any forms of fundamentalism or racism or a belief in ethnic superiority that makes our traditional identities irreconcilable with modernity. We see Russia attempting to recover lost glory through force.
Oh man, they're like, oh, how dare you! Oh man, they look so Russian. They look so spooky. It's just the craziest thing. Oh, stone face though, no reaction. Just how dare you talk about Mother Russia? I kill you.
I do not believe progress is possible if our desire to preserve our identities gives way to an impulse to dehumanize or dominate another group. If our religion leads us to persecute those of another faith, if we jail or beat people who are gay, if our traditions lead us to prevent girls from going to school, if we discriminate on the basis of race or tribe or ethnicity, then the fragile bonds of civilization will fray.
You know, it's not a small thing that he says that to the UN, because you have to remember most of those guys don't believe that. You know, they want to persecute people based on, you know, whether they're male or female or something like that. I mean, there's this idea of being able to somehow profit from it, and they believe it's perfectly fine. So for him to say that to the UN is not a small thing. You have to give him credit for that. No, he's not directly saying Islam, but he is kind of going hintity hint Islam. I think the thing that he really doesn't get is that these guys are okay with that. They're okay with extremism. They're okay with people suffering and all that, because it's not their problem. They're the ones on top, and if they've got to make that stuff happen to get whatever their ends are accomplished, they will. I don't know if he gets that, but at the same time, half the time I think this guy's trying to do this very same thing himself.
We can sustain our unique
I don't really know what to believe. I'm liking parts of this speech, and then other parts of it I'm going, you're an idiot. Which is what I've done pretty much the entire time with Obama.
Surely Israelis and Palestinians will be better off if Palestinians reject incitement and recognize the legitimacy of Israel. But Israel recognizes that it cannot permanently occupy and settle Palestinian land. We all have to do better.
I didn't expect him to say that. I don't know if Israel's occupying Palestinian land, though. It's a little more complicated than that. But, I mean, just the idea of him saying, hey, you need to recognize Israel's legitimacy in a room full of Muslims is kind of a big deal. This is a very different version of Obama than I'm used to seeing.
We cannot escape the prospect of nuclear war unless we all commit to stopping the spread of nuclear weapons and pursuing a world without them.
That is not going to happen. I don't know why in the world you possibly believe that could happen.
And those nations with these weapons, like the United States, have a unique responsibility to pursue the path of reducing our stockpiles. Reaffirming basic norms like the commitment to never test them again.
Yeah, and then all the other countries are like, "Oh yeah, sure, we're going to reduce our stockpiles." Yeah, yeah, Bob, get that crane back there. You know, we're gonna. Yeah, nothing to see here. We're reducing them. We're reducing them. Don't worry about it. Yeah, it'll be good. It'll be fine.
We brought to bear against Ebola by strengthening our own systems of public health.
You didn't do jack. A bunch of Christian organizations went in there and saved the day at the last minute. The government didn't do crap on Ebola.
Poor countries. I am convinced that in the long run, giving up some freedom of action, not giving up our ability to protect ourselves or pursue our core interests, but binding ourselves to international rules.
What are you talking about? What international rules? Whoa, 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 whoa. Who gets to decide those international rules? Now, this must be what they're referring to. What are you talking about?
Together, we mobilized some 50,000 additional troops for UN peacekeeping, making them nimble, better equipped, better prepared to deal with emergencies.
We've been giving crap to the UN. Why have we been giving stuff like that? Why have we been militarizing the UN? Is that what you said?
Let me conclude by saying that I recognize history tells a different story than the one that I've talked about here today, there's a much darker and more cynical view of history that we can adopt, that we can choose a better history. Sitting in a prison cell, a young Martin Luther King Jr. wrote that human progress never rolls on the wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts of men willing to be co-workers with God. And during the course of these 8 years, as I've traveled to many of your nations, I have
John
seen
Kerry's
that
just like,
spirit.
I don't care, I
in our
don't
young
care, I don't care, I don't care. Actually,
In
you know,
our
he looks
generation.
like that. I don't know if you guys, if you're not a 90s kid, you
more
won't get that, but he actually looks like one of those creepy
compassionate
raisin
towards
guys, those old commercials with the
fellow human
raisins that
beings
played the saxophone. He
than
reminds me of a
previous
raisin playing a saxophone.
My own family is made up of the flesh and blood and traditions and cultures and faiths from a lot of different parts of the world. Just as America has been built by immigrants from every shore.
Oh, she looks really mad there.
And in my own life,
Oh, she looked really mad. Oh, wow.
in this country,
Ugh.
and as president, I have learned that our identities do not have to be defined by putting someone else down, but can be enhanced by lifting somebody else up. That they don't have to be defined in opposition to others, but rather by a belief in liberty and equality and justice and fairness. And the embrace of these principles as universal doesn't weaken my particular pride, my particular love for America. It strengthens it. My belief that these ideals apply everywhere doesn't lessen my commitment to help those who look like me or pray as I do or pledge allegiance to my flag. But my faith in those principles does force me to expand my moral imagination and to recognize that I can best serve my own people. I can best look after my own daughters by making sure that my actions seek what is right for all people and all children and your daughters and your sons. This is what I
I don't
believe.
disagree with any of that
All of us
necessarily.
can be
Just,
co-workers with God. And our leadership and our governments and this United Nations should reflect this irreducible truth. Thank you very much.
okay, this is why I've always went back and forth with President Obama for years. I've never been able to exactly get a read on what he's about. A few videos back, I made this statement that Obama was essentially V. I believed that he was intentionally trying to rip the country apart using kind of inner division and based on his inconsistent policies. But when I watch a speech like that, I wonder about that analysis because that's not consistent. You know, these principles that he talks about, I agree with. But then he turns around and lies, like the situation with the Ebola crisis. That wasn't an example where the UN helped and saved the day. They didn't do crap. A bunch of private Christian organizations came in at the last second and bailed everybody out when the UN had failed to save the crisis. So that wasn't true. Of course, climate change is debated. I mean, and then there was all those petty little backhanded comments to Trump and whatnot. And so he does stuff like that on the one hand, and then he turns around and starts talking about these principles, these ethereal ideas about how it's great to, you know, love one another and peace and happiness and international whatever. And then he starts saying spooky crap like global schools. I mean, the guy goes back and forth, and it's almost impossible to get a read on him sometimes. Now, as for the weird rumors kind of sparking up on the internet about him saying that we should submit to a global authority or whatever, I can see where they got that if you quote mined the freedom comment. That was spooky. I don't know what he meant by that. He didn't define what he meant. He didn't explain what he meant. And when somebody makes a comment like that and then they don't elaborate on it, that generally scares the crap out of people and they go, oh my gosh, he's wanting a one-world government. It's the end of the world. Crap. Overall, I think this was actually a pretty good speech. And you have to give him a little bit of credit. I mean, to sit there and say, hey, you know, if your belief system causes you to persecute homosexuals and women and, you know, kill them or not let them get an education, it's wrong. I mean, that's pretty ballsy considering that he's talking to a bunch of Muslims in the room. you got to give him something for that. Now, no, he didn't say, "Oh, Islam is bad and Islam, you got to get your act together." He didn't do that, but he was like, "Hey, this isn't good, guys." And that's more than I've ever heard from him. This was a very different Obama than I'm used to seeing. So I was a little taken aback by it. I don't really think the hype that the speech got was really justified. That's my opinion about this speech. Remember, I've cut this up and edited it so you guys can watch it as a shorter pace, so you're not having to sit for a whole hour. If you want me to post the whole thing, be sure to let me know. I think it's important to watch all these speeches, to sit down and actually analyze what these guys say instead of just reacting to what pundits say. I want to try to just give a little bit of a reaction, give a little bit more of a context instead of just quote mining it. But I understand that you guys can't sit down for an hour and a half and watch a whole speech as well. So let me know what you think. Let me know what you guys would prefer. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, like, share, subscribe, all of that. And guys, thanks again. I appreciate your time. We're going to go ahead and get out of here. I'm going to pull up my outro music. We'll see you next time.